All right, well, welcome everyone. Sorry, that's a little loud. My name is Scotty. I'm a volunteer here at Denver Startup Week and super excited for our second day. Is this their first session of Startup Week? Cool, all right. So Product Track has our keynote tonight. So we're excited, kind of kicking off the second day with lots of events. Also this evening there is the pitch competition over at headquarters, which is pretty fun. So a bunch of young aspiring startups competing for some money to get themselves started up and funded. So that's, I believe, from 6. The finals of that are at 6 o'clock tonight, so that's fun. But anyway, with that, just want to thank you all for coming. Part of Denver Startup Week that makes it so special is it's volunteer driven. And with that, obviously the community that supports this is speakers and panelists like the folks behind me, but all of you attending and taking part. Been a little bit of time since COVID and all of that to kind of see the community and who's showing up. But I've been talking to a lot of folks that have moved here in the last several years and being able to expose Denver Startup Week to a whole new group of folks that are new to the area. So with that, I just want to thank all of you for coming. Hopefully you can take part in many more events. This is an exciting session set up. And so with that, I'll pass it off to Cole.
All right, Scotty, thank you. Welcome. We are here for Buy Now, e-commerce design and product collaboration. I hope you're in the right place. If you are not in the right place, you can't leave anyways, so welcome. So 11th Annual Denver Startup Week, here we are. Big thank you, of course, to the sponsors. So Amazon, Capital One Cafe, Dell for Startups, and the Downtown Denver Partnership. Without them, we don't have Startup Week, so big thank you, of course, to all the sponsors. And this session is, of course, as Scotty mentioned, a part of the Product Track. So the Product Track sponsor is Pi Insurance. They're local. I think there's some Pi Insurance information around here. You'll probably see some Pi Insurance folks. So give them a shout out if you do see them. Thanks for sponsoring the Product Track. And then a couple of quick notes. So by attending, you're agreeing to follow the code of conduct, and as well as be photographed or recorded on video. This is being recorded right now. It will be shared out. And if you feel so inclined, be sure to share your experience and use hashtag Denver Startup Week. Just Den. Okay, more sponsor information. Here we are. Thank you all. All right, let's get into it. So who are we?
Well, I'm Zach Wendt. Can you guys hear me in the back okay? We've got a sweet mic sitch going on. Zach Wendt. I work for a company called Nimble Gravity, which is a Denver-based company, and I run the experimentation team for Nimble Gravity.
Hi everyone, I am Charlotte Cunningham. I am a UI UX designer working for a pretty cool company called Crafted, which you'll hear a bit more about in a minute. So I do any and all design for them and the clients we work with.
Great. My name is TJ Bowen, and I've been in product development for a while. Started out in nonprofit CRM and fundraising software, and now work for Crafted, which is a product consultancy that, like Charlotte said, you'll hear a lot more in a minute. I do product work with Crafted, and we all work on the same client, and looking to share some insight with you all today.
And I am Cole Capsalis, also a product manager with Crafted. So I will just jump into what is Crafted now that you've heard 3 of us all work at the same company. Crafted Solutions is a balanced team software development consultancy. So we take on any project from digital transformation to app modernization to greenfield software development. And at the core of our approach is marrying together 3 specific disciplines. So like Charlotte, UI, UX design, TJ and myself fall into the product management track there, and then engineering, of course, to help with technical feasibility. We can come up with all the great ideas in the world, but if we're not able to execute on them, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's a little bit about Crafted and kind of our approach, a little bit about our thought process there. Zach, how about Nimble Gravity?
Yeah, could you show off our sweet logo? There we go. So Nimble Gravity is a digital consultancy. We specialize in giving our clients the tools and techniques to use data to either drive their business forward or to optimize efficiency and create products like what we're going to talk about today. We do everything related to data science, web analytics, supply chain engineering, and of course A/B testing, which is one of the things we're here to talk about today. So yeah, data, if there's anything in the tech space with data, we've touched it for sure.
Great. All right, now that you know a little bit more about us and who we work for, we want to find a little bit more out about you all. So let's see, who's in the audience? First want to know if you can raise your hand if you have worked in or currently work in the product space. All right, great. So that's like over half the room. Cool. All right, next question is if you are in the UX or design space, please raise your hand. All right, a couple. Okay, cool. And then the other question is if you're in the A/B testing or analytics space, please raise your hand. All right, nice. That's probably the other third. Nice. All right. Another question is if you are in product or design or UX, how many of you have or currently work with an A/B testing team or an analytics team? Great. All right. So that's probably the majority of product and design, but not everybody. And then if you're in the A/B or testing or analytics space, how many of you work directly with a design team or UX team? Great. That's a lot of you as well. So we'll be talking about a lot of this in just a bit. And then last question is, if you feel like you're being A/B tested right now, please raise your hand. All right, cool. You kind of are. All right, so we'll go on to the next slide. This slide's all about why the heck should you listen to all of us up here. If you're in product, you're probably kind of skeptical. If you're in A/B and analytics, you're probably very skeptical about things. So why should you listen to us? Well, this team up here, along with others that we've worked with over the last year, have done some pretty great things with the client that we're working with. And we believe a lot of the results come from a really unique way of how we have A/B testing and UX collaborating with each other. So Zach's going to walk us through some of our successes.
Yeah, so since Cole had the slides from us, I'll read them out loud. So the team that you see up here is not just the only team that works for the client that we're talking about today. There's probably collectively 20 plus people that work from an engineering standpoint, design, analysis, et cetera. And across that team, there you go, we've run over 100 experiments in under 2 years. Those experiments can be attributed to over $10 million in revenue gains. We've spanned tests across over 20 million sessions. And just to flex one muscle, is we ran one test that we'll go over today that drove an 18% increase in site-wide conversion just from a single test.
Okay, let's start super high level. What are we talking about when we say A/B testing, and what are we talking about when we say user testing? So, Zach, you got the mic. Just give us a high level definition. What is A/B testing?
Yeah, so at the highest level, A/B testing is comparing one variant to another. So a lot of times you hear a control versus a variant, or even doing a longitudinal test, which is a type of split testing, where you have a current design, you release a new design, and you compare the new design to the old. So there's a lot of different types of A/B testing. They're listed up there. But in general, today we're going to be talking about a multivariate test that we ran, and how we got to that multivariate test with user testing and UX design.
All right, for the uninformed here, like myself, what is a variant, Zach?
Yes, so kind of like what I'd mentioned, old design, new design, it can be much more than that too. There can be specific elements on the page that you want to change, specific user journeys that you want to change, and every time you make one of those changes, that could be considered a variant. There can be multiple variables within a variant that you change. So for an example, if you change the color and the copy, that is two different variants or two different variables that can attribute to one variant. But it can be so much further than just copy and colors, right? We're talking about user journeys, even multi-page activities can be a single variant within a larger test. If you've ever been on Amazon, guaranteed you're actively being A/B tested. Notably, I guess Instagram recently released some update that everybody hated. You might have heard of it. That was a part of an A/B test in which it was pre and post launch. So yeah, that would be an example of a two variant before and after split test. Yeah.
Cool. And what are we talking about today with this specific client?
The one in the middle, which is called a multivariate test. This is time agnostic, so all variants were running at the same time, which is really good at reducing biases in the test. And so what you'll see in a minute is a three variant plus control. So an example of a four-prong multivariate test. There is one type of test on here that I'll just talk about because it's a cool name. Is an algorithmically optimized multivariate test, which you can use really fancy A/B testing tools to drive towards a conclusion faster. That is not what we're talking about today. We're talking about a little simpler version of that. So,
Awesome. All right, Charlotte, you want to talk us through user testing? What is user testing?
Yeah, so user testing is a very wide umbrella. It pretty much includes anytime you receive feedback directly from your actual users or potential users. So this can include anything from surveys to card sorts, interviews, both with prototypes or just interviewing folks to get a sense of their motivations on a platform. So that's what we've called out here is generative versus validation. So generative is when you're hoping to learn about your users, what inspires them to visit your platform or engage with the product you're building. And then validation is testing your actual product where you're validating that it works for your user group.
All right. So what is the scope difference here, Charlotte? How is that different than A/B testing like Zach was talking about?
Yeah, great question, Cole. So scope differs in that user testing is typically a lot narrower than A/B testing. A/B testing, you get every user that engages with your platform often is involved in an A/B test, whereas user testing, you're able to focus in on very specific populations. So you can either reach out to specific user groups, such as the elderly, the disabled, the young, if you want to target a specific persona that you feel you have not been engaging with, or you can target specifically, a user that interacts with your platform a lot and you want to optimize it for them. So it allows you to really narrow in on a specific group, and there are both pros and cons to the limited scope in that you can get a lot more direct feedback, but it's also much more narrow in terms of vision.
Awesome. And what are some common methods that you use for user testing?
Yeah, so some common methods. I mentioned that user testing spans a really wide range of tests. One that we engage with a lot on our client and at Crafted is user interviews. This involves both validation and generative. So we'll either get to know the users, see what they want, what they need, what sort of features are missing from the platform, or if we're hoping to optimize their page or introduce a new idea, we'll go and validate that with users to really decrease risk once we actually code and build that. Lets us make sure we're building what users need, what the business needs, and that it'll really work for everyone.
Very important point there. No engineers on this stage. Takes a long time. Those are expensive if you place a wrong bet and get something into engineering track. This is all about de-risking that and making sure that we're building the right things. All right, let's talk outcomes. What do we want? So, yeah, look at that, Zach. Step up to the plate. So what are we focusing on? What are our metrics for success with A/B tests?
Yeah, so on the previous slide, one of the goals of an A/B test is to understand how KPIs are affected by a test. And so, the outcome that we aim for when we run an A/B test is to drive an increase or a decrease in KPIs, which key performance indicators commonly are conversion rate, click-through rate, time on page, general user behavior, right? So that's what's up there. But from a perspective of defining a successful test, it's really about attributing the gains that we would see in these KPIs. So for example, if we were able to attribute a 5% increase in revenue, then that is the desired outcome of a test, right? And you can do that across multiple variants, and that's kind of what we'll look at. But in general, the KPIs that we strive for are obviously in the e-com space related to how you make money. In other spaces, it can be about, how long do people spend on your page, or how many pages do they see, right? Those are all things that we can track, and with the outcome being that we, push the user towards a desired state.
Love it. Charlotte, what are we looking to get out of user testing? Why do we do those interviews? Why do we do validation testing?
Yeah, so user testing, hard to measure success as well as with A/B testing. A lot of the metrics definitely overlap because we want to for sure meet business goals as we're user testing. But as designers, our main goal is to create a good experience for the users themselves. So if they're purchasing, they're typically happy, they're satisfied with the platform. So that feeds into conversion rates, how often they're purchasing, as well as just user engagement with the platform. Are they interacting while they are on the product? And then also in the e-commerce space, retention through that sales funnel. So not only are they enjoying the experience as they enter the site, but are they moving throughout the site in the way that we would hope through the end of it really shows that we've had a good user experience. And then obviously user satisfaction is pretty indicative by how many support complaints you're getting. So we always aim to decrease the work of the support department as one of our goals.
Love it. All right. So we know what we're doing. We know what we're trying to measure with each of these disciplines. TJ, why are we up here?
Said so dramatically. Okay, well, let me see if I can answer that. From the product perspective, working with this client and working with Charlotte and the design team and the UX team and Zach with Nimble Gravity and the data analytics team, it's a really great environment to be in with product. And it's especially because of the collaboration between all three disciplines. So from the UX side of things, we're able to create some initial designs going into the test, so the different variants that are a lot stronger. A lot of times the A/B testing is kind of like with data, any sort of data, it's junk in or garbage in, garbage out. So if the variants that we have just kind of suck, then we're not going to learn as much, and the results won't be as good. So the design team really contributes a lot in terms of the research and the testing and validation that goes into creating really strong variants out of the gate. So we know that what we're getting into is likely going to lead us to something better than where we're at today with the control. It also helps us make a lot of subtle improvements over time. So even if there isn't uplift directly with e-commerce or other kind of hard metrics that we're working with, the design is going to look better. It's going to be more consistent with what people are seeing on the internet today, provide more legitimacy for the site, et cetera. So when you add that in, add into that mix great design, a great A/B testing team, it's frankly kind of a fantasy zone from the product perspective, because we're getting such great data from Nimble Gravity and also the data team with our client that it makes product decision making way easier. I don't want to describe like a fantasy land for product. Cole's chuckling because as always, there's complications and things that go into it that kind of blow our minds and make for a really stressful day here and there. But in terms of the certainty we have around the decisions that we're making and the way that we can represent our decisions to stakeholders is just so much stronger with the analytics that Nimble Gravity is providing us. So what I'm able to do is say we have 5 top opportunities for the next sprint. I can weigh those, and if 2 of them are really fast and one of them has 5% platform uplift and one of them has 2% platform uplift, well, guess what? I'm going to go with the 5% one that's really fast to build and can provide great uplift for our users. So decision making is way easier and a lot more confident with design and A/B. Zach, Charlotte, anything to add on that?
Just to call out some big words on the screen, the last three slides have really been, you can boil them down to just two words: quantitative versus qualitative, right? Experimentation, like A/B testing, and the utilization of web analytics is quantitative data. But when you pair that with the qualitative data that's generated with UX and user research, it's really quite fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, to just expand on that a little bit, A/B gives the what users are doing, what they're engaging with, what they're clicking on, whereas user testing gives us the why of what users are doing, helps us understand their motivations and target it a little bit more. And then product comes in and helps us get those what's and whys actually out in the world.
All right, love it. Welcome to Product Fantasy Land. So this, I just want to quickly touch on. This might look familiar for people who are in product development, kind of a divergent and convergent thinking path with iterative development. So this is a really common way that Crafted, TJ, myself, Charlotte approach software development. What this doesn't necessarily capture and what we benefit so greatly from in working with Nimble Gravity and working on this specific client is layering in that A/B test component here. So this might look more like generative research, iterating on that, slowly honing in the product as we go. But with the volume of users that we have, and with this amazing setup that we have for A/B testing, we've been able to kind of tweak our process a little bit. So that got more complicated. We have more boxes up here. We have different areas of ownership. But functionally, I think it generally, the adaptation is not that crazy when we break it down. So we want to leverage the best of both worlds. We want that strong design, UI, UX research component. We want to understand why our users are doing certain things. But now we can layer in that A/B testing component. So moving left to right is pretty much how that last diagram worked as well. But then you can see this nice split, and those green boxes are where we're able to use that sort of multivariant, hey, let's try this. We understand this problem. Our UX and research team has validated, yeah, this is definitely a problem. We can improve this. How can we go out and layer in different experiences for different subsets of users and understand, sometimes really quickly, sometimes over a longer period of time, which of these options, which are all likely options that were provided by the design team, maybe is more effective at driving what we're hoping to drive. So you can see in doing so, we can just add another component to that iterative approach. Like TJ mentioned, we can make decisions with higher confidence. And in many cases, we can iterate more rapidly and we can be more effective in those iterations. I think we're happy to dive deeper into these process components, maybe in Q&A a little bit later on. We don't want to beat these up too much. I think the most important thing for everybody to understand is the cycle time on this process can vary very widely. So it could be anywhere from like 4 days. We could identify a problem, spin up a couple of variants, and get some learnings really quickly using some great tooling like optimize, things we'll talk about maybe later on. Or if it's a little bit meatier of a problem, or maybe we have less sessions of people engaged with any given pathway, you could be talking about months of time for some of these learnings. So extremely variable, but generally speaking, iterative development using the best of both worlds and all the inputs that we can. Anything to add in there? Let's go on. Let's get into the meaty stuff.
All right, so that process that we just outlined, this is a real life example from a real test that we really ran, and we're gonna go over real data. So just some background and table setting here. The client relies on user-generated content to form pretty much everything that you see in gray. And within that user-generated content, there are paths to e-commerce. Not exclusive to the bottoms that the buttons you see at the bottom, but that obviously is something that we decided to test, because if you look at the current design, it's big and somewhat intrusive and takes away from the user-generated content that is so valuable to the people that are visiting the page. The people that generally visit these pages don't return very often. It's likely their first time there, but they're very invested in what is on the page. And so, our job becomes really challenging when we're trying to balance what's valuable to the user and what is valuable to the business, right? So this test is an attempt at that. For those that can't see the variants, one is big buttons right behind Charlotte. And then there's some smaller buttons that have some icons, and smaller buttons without icons, and then buttons that are underlined with those icons. How did we get to these variants, Charlotte?
Great question, Zach, and thank you for those phenomenal design descriptions. Yeah, so like Zach said, users typically look like first-time visitors. An important piece to add is they're usually in the older age range, folks engaging with this user-generated content, and they are likely to not return here. So we really only have one opportunity to capture their attention. So like Zach mentioned, this first test here in green, version A, had phenomenal uplift, but we thought that there was opportunity to improve here. So we've got these giant buttons that are static on the page as the user scrolls. But what if we modernize this, made it less intrusive while also copying existing patterns to make it more familiar to the user? And so that's where these blue versions come in, as copying existing patterns that we see across other user-generated content sites, such as social media, as well as the mobile versions of various e-commerce platforms.
When you're done. Yeah, so just one thing I forgot to add. The current design that you see on the left, that's actually the result of a previous test. So that is the culmination of this whole process, and we decided we wanted to go and iterate on it even further because we observed the uplift we did, which was the Easter egg that I planted earlier. This variant made site-wide an 18% increase to attributed revenue for the entire company, which is super awesome. So of course we wanted to capitalize on that even further, and this was that test.
Great. So now we're going to maybe wake you up after your after lunch lull. So we wanted to hear from you what you like the best, just to see if there's any difference from what the audience opinion is versus what the A/B test across like hundreds of thousands, millions of users revealed. So raise your hand if you think that, or if you like variant 1. Or if you think variant 1 will perform better. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That was maybe 20%, 15. Okay, raise your hand if you think variant 2 is likely to perform better. All right, that might be half of us. Okay. Raise your hand if you think variant 3 will perform better. All right, 1. Okay, so variant 2 is so far the winner. Raise your hand if you think the control is likely to perform the best. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so about as many as variant 1, so about maybe 10 or 15%. All right, so let's see what the results said.
So 3 of you are right. This test was a complete shock to us. Like Charlotte went over these designs. This is big and ugly, and somewhat intrusive. And the other designs were much more optimized for mobile and a modern UX. But it turns out that our users completely disagreed with what we thought was good. And that you can see the click patterns and the conversion rate impacts that were observed with these variants. Just to level set too, this test was run at the exact same time. It was agnostic of users or the pages that these lived on, so it was just complete random session allocation as to what people saw. So there's very limited bias here. And it turns out that the visitors to our site really heavily preferred, both financially and activity-wise, this control version, which is pretty staggering.
Well, Charlotte was going to talk a bit on, oh, sorry, I'm going out of order. Go ahead. Sorry about
So just to talk some more numbers, this is not the same test, but I wanted to kind of showcase, when it comes to establishing what is good and attributing gains to the tests that we see, the world's your oyster. Analytics is vast and complex, and there's really nice tools that can help you understand that pretty seamlessly. This is a free tool. We use it all the time. It's a Google tool, if you couldn't tell by the design. And this is an actual example of a different test output that we observed. And there's a bunch of fancy calculations that go into that, and I could lull you to sleep with the details of that. But the whole point is to show that you can go do this yourself, or even with our help, at very low cost, right? Like that's a huge thing. We're throwing around really big numbers and really complicated ideas maybe, but there's tons of tools to support this, and this is, you can get a ton of information from a very, very, very simple test, which happens to be the case for this one.
All right, now Charlotte's going to talk us through her process of user interviews and how we learned why the heck users thought something way different than we all thought would be successful.
Yeah, so here's a quick reminder of just how the performance went. And like Zach mentioned, we were all just really shocked by the results. So rather than moving on to a different test and continuing to run things and get numbers, we really wanted to know why users were behaving like this. And this is a great place for user testing to come in. So what we did is we utilized the platform userinterviews.com, and we're able to source people that were similar to the existing users for this e-commerce platform. And we interviewed them. We presented the prototypes that were tested, and we asked them what they thought about the interactions, watched how they acted on the page, and asked which they preferred and why, so that we could take those insights to have better informed tests in the future. I don't have a super cool sort of data analytics slide like Zach does. User testing tends to get pretty messy. This is typically what my process looks like. I found that user interviews, a great way to gain insights is whether you are using a platform and you have the backing of a company, or you're just doing 10-minute coffee shop interviews. The best thing is to take really clear notes, and then once you have those notes, take all of those thoughts and see where you find patterns. So I utilize Miro. It's a great platform, allows me to sticky note a lot of things. So this is what those patterns start to emerge. And you can see that there's bigger patterns and smaller patterns, and we'll call those out. And what you often find is that we gained insights into people preferred the bigger buttons because they were easy to read and easy to see, and they wanted to know what was going on. But then we also got important feedback like the color of a button was harder to read, or even feedback unrelated to the buttons themselves on the user-generated content and how we could do that. So that's how you get a lot of great insights from these user interviews. So you're able to take all of these thoughts and find insights, so insight A, B, C, and then you're also able to validate existing patterns. So users are like, oh, I really like the way this is laid out. I like the navigation, especially if you're testing a new product. It's a great way to validate things that have not seen the light yet. And then you can also get call outs for what needs improvement, even outside of what you were trying to gain insights on. And I'm sure there's a lot more to speak to for user interviews, so anyone has questions can definitely dive a bit more into this for Q&A. But an important thing to note is just like A/B testing, anyone can run user testing. Like I mentioned, there's free platforms such as usertesting.com, userinterviews.com, where you can source from your own network for free and run these. You can also just go to coffee shops and interview people. One time I had to go to a mall with a clipboard, and I was one of those people asking questions. So there's really a range of things you can do this, from small startups to just your own individual products can still benefit and utilize user interviews and user testing techniques.
Awesome, thank you. And I had the privilege of accompanying Charlotte through this round of user interviews and some others as well. And she always does a great job. I don't know if any of you have been that person or that product person, or seen the product person or the owner do some user interviews, and the questions are something like, why do you think that button is better than this other one? Or why do you, there are these leading questions that are asked, and Charlotte is just absolutely amazing at just flowing through a conversation very casually without asking leading questions. But what other advice do you have for the group in terms of setting up user testing, like in the preparation and how to do a good job with it?
Yeah, in terms of user testing, I found that having a good script written out really helps you, not for following along directly, but just making sure that you are hitting on all the points you want to hit on. Nothing's worse than that feeling of after you finished up an hour-long interview, oh, I totally forgot to ask about this piece. So I found that writing scripts and having people review them really helps make sure you're hitting on all the talking points you want to engage with. And it can also help make sure you're not, like TJ mentioned, asking leading questions. So something you really want to avoid is, well, why do you think this is better? Or sort of implying the user to think certain things. You want to ask more high-ended questions like, which version do you think is better? Or what are your thoughts on this page? Or how would you think to find something on this page rather than where do you see the navigation or something like that? So it's definitely a tricky balance, but I found a script and avoiding leading questions are a lot of the big pieces, as well as taking good notes, recording if you can, just because memory is fallible, so it's great to have the written record to work from.
It's also good evidence if anybody doesn't believe the like counterintuitive results. We haven't had that happen, but one thing that was really surprising to me with the interviews around the buttons that we were showing you earlier is that a lot of us on the product side of things thought that it was actually the winning variant was creating a bad user experience. We thought that putting these massive buttons on the page that really hid some of the user-generated content was disruptive to the user, but it also improved commerce. But actually what we learned in the interviews was that not only did it improve commerce, but the users actually preferred the really big buttons for the reasons Charlotte cited. They were easier to read, more accessible. So that was a really interesting insight that we learned, along with a lot of other insights. Great. All right, so the tools slide. We won't do an audience pulse on who's used what tools, but Charlotte mentioned Miro earlier, and I'm assuming that most of you have probably used Miro by now, but if you haven't, it's, in my opinion, the most amazing collaborative tool that we've had built yet. It's just such a leg up from a lot of the Google Docs and other tools that we've used in the past. It's like real-time collaboration on steroids. We all use it every day. We actually just came out of a meeting from 12 to 1 where we were using it. It's an amazing tool. But we've got a lot of other tools up here. A lot of them, Zach and Charlotte can maybe speak to for a couple minutes, and then we can head into Q&A.
Yeah, so user interviews is up here. I mentioned that already is a great place to source. They have a great user pool that you can select from, and that allows you to target specific users, either by, they have so many demographic statistics on there. It's really pretty insane what you can target there, but definitely target by age, income, profession. One of my coworkers recently used it to specifically target professionals, so people who were in the professional environment, so you can really use it to either source from your own thing and just set up great user interviews or target specific demographics. And then I think the other one that applies to my work is Figma, which is still the superior wireframing tool despite its Adobe purchase. So I found that Figma is great for collaboration, both with other designers as well as with developers and project managers. Allows you to really get your thoughts out there and has phenomenal prototyping capabilities for some of that validation testing. It allows users to engage with it as if it were a real website without putting in the effort of development. Then I'll let Zach speak to some of the others.
Yeah, so if you've been listening to me, probably the 10th word out of my mouth is either data or analytics. So that one right in the middle, Google Analytics, is really the lifeblood of our processes. Not to say it's the only tool. Adobe has similar tools, and there's plenty of different analytics platforms, but Google Analytics is super great, and it works super well with, of course, Google Optimize. So Google Optimize is the tried and true A/B testing tool, whereas Google Analytics is an analytics platform. You don't need to use Google Optimize with Google Analytics. Analytics can exist on its own, and a lot of times it does. People don't A/B test, but they do use analytics for reporting on user journeys throughout their site, or funnels, or checkout performance, just general website health, even, and general activity, even down to custom event tracking, which we utilize a ton. Then another one on here that's worth noting is Hotjar. So this one's actually probably the closest to the combination of quantitative and qualitative. It's a heat mapping tool amongst a couple other things, but it shows you, where do people's cursors go, or where do the most people click on. Probably the a bad example of a free tool is Optimizely. This is kind of, I don't know what you'd want to call it, the superstar tool. You kind of have to be a professional football player to play with it, if that makes sense. And same with Jira, right? Jira's super good tool. It's generally not free for most people. I don't think it's free at all even. But we use Jira every day for managing, engineering backlogs and even task management. So those are kind of where I live, but like TJ touted, Miro is super awesome. We use it for rough design, even road mapping, note taking. It's a huge whiteboard that everybody can play with at the exact same time, and that's super valuable for our processes.
Yeah, and it seems to be great across all disciplines too, because engineers or technical PMs can use it for flow charting and a lot of process diagramming, and designs in it all the time, and we can vote on designs that we like and comment. So
brainstorming, I mean, it's a fantasy land too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you got a question?
Quick question. Is Hotjar, you said, can track cursor movements?
Yeah, so
from the users?
yeah, sometimes it's cursor movements. It kind of can generate a report that you would want. So if you're looking at a mobile device, where do people click on the most out of a very large data set? I'd have to check on Hotjar, but I know that there are some tools where they actually track users' eye movement. So you can see where on the page they're looking, which is kind of creepy, but also awesome.
So just
Yeah.
a quick follow-up is that just for mobile applications, or can that be used for also like just laptop-based applications and also web?
Yeah, you can put it, some of these tools you can put on anything that's software-based. Obviously everything we've been talking about is very much the web and software on the web, but yeah, mobile applications, you can use it as well.
And that actually kicks off our Q&A quite nicely. So we'll jump into Q&A, and but before we do, just another note on the companies that we work with. So Crafted Solutions, where Charlotte, Cole, and I all work. Great company, awesome culture, and we love to work with a variety of software companies. So if you're interested in collaborating with us, it would be great. We obviously work for money, but if you want to reach out to us, we like networking too, because we love to converse on our trade and our craft, and we also like learning too. So if you stuck through us with this whole talk for the last 45 minutes or so, and have any advice for us and feedback to give us, we'd welcome that, and we'd love to keep learning with you over time. And Nimble Gravity's great to work with as well. Zach, any
Yeah,
closing
definitely.
words?
I'd echo the same. I think everybody up here is probably going to stick around after this if anybody has questions, or outside of Q&A, if you've got something super targeted, I'm happy to field those. Yeah, Nimble Gravity works with companies of all sizes, ranging from probably 2 people to multi-billion-dollar corporations. So multinational, and would also love to work with anybody. And if you guys are even interested in working with us, scan the QR code and you can come hang out. Yeah, we also work for money. So.
And this isn't scanning your eyeballs back, so don't worry, it's not that.
No,
not that
it
creepy.
does not. We don't have eye tracking
Yeah.
in this presentation.
We haven't hooked up Hotjar to the projector. But let's go into Q&A. Just go ahead and raise your hand if you have questions. Yes.
Thanks for the presentation. Really great. Product has a lot of challenges and stakeholders with it, and especially when you're testing things. How do you guys kind of control it? Do you have tools or tactics to control your assumptions and biases, or just like call them out before or part of that process? And then at the end of the process, when you're going back, how do you create like a culture where when you find out that some assumptions or biases are wrong, people can like take ownership of that and not feel like isolated, or like how do you create that culture of like acceptance and knowing this isn't a testing kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me restate real quick, and then we'll go ahead and answer. And forgive me if I'm not restating exactly. You can correct me. So, like, how do we create a culture to overcome bias? Do we have any tools or tips on that? Product and all of us work with a lot of different stakeholders, sometimes really difficult to deal with. So, how do we ensure that we're not that we're able to overcome our assumptions over time, and then come back and reflect? And is that
Yeah, like when people are wrong, like how do you create like a
Absolutely. Since I'm already talking, I'll take a quick stab. We have a loser board that tracks all the wrong assumptions. I'm just kidding. No, the thing I love about the environment we're in is that we have like user testing and so much data where ego is a lot less of a part of it. It's still definitely part to it that we can probably talk to in a sec. But because we have a lot of data on it that can attribute, we did X and it probably has a 5% gain over control, then we know it. It's no one's ego is involved. We may not know exactly why, and we can do user testing or other ways to figure out why it had uplift, but that's something that I love about the environment we're in, and also just it's not really a tool, but it's kind of a cultural thing that we've, I think, cultivated and kept where there's a lot of rigorous debate, and I don't think people take things personally, like we're not personally attached to an idea, or at least longer than a few minutes, and I don't think we hold any grudges, and it's kind of from the top down. There's a little bit of ego from the top, but it's more, I think, excitement than like any sort of punishing ego that comes. But
Yeah, so actually, Cole, if you could go back to the slide with the nice, pretty numbers, that one, yeah. So this is a super great example of that, because you can't argue with data at this scale. In terms of this test, we were targeting sessions and conversions that were purchase complete, which means those conversion rates were actual purchases. So on the orders of thousands, and those numbers educate probability to be the best. So this is just statistical math, and I've got a thing I didn't call out over there called frequentist versus Bayesian. So there's a load of statistics that go into, what is right, how much is it right, why is it right, and you can't, it's inarguable, right? It's quantitative. And so when you have a large ego or you have these really big ideas, it's kind of inarguable when you see something counter to that. And to echo what TJ's saying is, no one's tied to a single design or even a single concept or idea, because as long as we're winning, everybody wins. And with that, I think the culture is like, everybody's kept in check and is excited to be kept in check. And this whole process of gathering information from actual users and then gathering lots and lots of data is inherently a bias reduction. And you kind of see the team drift towards like, what is the best product rather than, what's the best test or what's the best design. It's very much a dance between the two.
Charlie Stewart, everybody, who asked this question. This is not an audience plant. I just happen to know him. He makes fantastic hot sauce, so come talk to the guy bizarrely wearing the Bulls jersey. I'll give you a couple tactical things. I think that at a high level, those are all absolutely on point. I think there's a couple things that are really helpful for us in setting some of those boundaries and making sure that there's no hurt feelings, bruised egos, whatever it might be. Understand what your goal is before going into the test. Say, like, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to move the needle on? And sometimes it's conversions, and sometimes it's whatever. If we understand what success is, it makes it a lot easier for everybody to say, like, okay, well, did this thing work or not? And then how do we move forward from it? Second, one person is not solely responsible for all of the design work or the interaction work on any given thing. So we do a lot of consensus things using tools like Miro to say, here's a number of options. Like, here might be 10 or 12 options for this. We only really want 3 or 4 of these. Like, how can we, settle on things that as a group, whatever that decision-making group is, whatever your group of stakeholders is, like, what do we feel like our best bets are? Let's move forward with those, and then let's see if we need to go back and iterate on those.
One other quick note, and we'll take more questions, but I have a memory of earlier today, we were reviewing the results of a test, and it actually had some really good uplift. It was like 3% platform-wide. And the highest ranking stakeholder on the call, who's with our private equity group, he's like really invested in these calls. He said on the call, quote, "The internet is so humbling." So to the point on like bias and being right or wrong, like this is our highest stakeholder, and the test won. He thought another test would have a lot higher uplift. It's doing awful. I think we'll get there though, because I think the design team's coming up with some way better designs. But the test we ran, we thought, maybe it'll do something, and it had really awesome results. And so that was fun to see today.
All right, anybody else out there? Yes, please.
I have two. Is it Zach? One for Zach. I'm not sure how common this is, but when you're using like those heat mapping tools like Hotjar, how do you weed out if reach clicking is a factor at all? Which is a newer thing for me, and I was like, what a cool name. And then for Charlotte, right?
Yeah.
What is your ongoing maintenance for UX? Because like post-launch, once the product is out, there's so much done pre-launch. Is it like a time frame or something triggered it, like complaints or something broke? Like just
Yeah, so I'll take the first piece, which the question was, how do you account for abnormal behavior like rage clicking, right? Which reminds me, my wife, when she reads things, she highlights the whole sentence and then like moves to the next one. It's the most manic thing I've ever seen. But it very, very often happens. And that's the beauty of, large sample size data is those naturally kind of fall as, less common or outliers within the data. So Hotjar is exactly a heat mapping tool. So it shows you what is, the warmest event that would happen on a page versus the coldest. So heat mapping inherently is a reduction of like those really weird behaviors. It's not just specific to one user, it's across your entire user base, which is super nice. You can also do it with like custom event tracking through GA, where you have specific types of events that only fire on certain conditions, and then you only use those to digest. So you can to digest what user behavior is. So you kind of can use the combination of multiple tools to actually figure out what are people doing on the page, where are they going, where are they coming from, and what on the page do they prefer to interact with versus other things within a specific user funnel or even a e-com journey.
the CTA is broken and then clicking, what is the heat map? Like, well, this is the best CTA, but it's actually broken and people are clicking.
Yeah, well, I guess if the CTA is broken, then it means we didn't do our jobs. But right, yeah. So other sources of feedback, a lot of times we rely on like the support team. That happens a lot, actually, where a new feature will go out because we do release so much all the time that people will say, hey, this is really broken or this looks confusing. But we account for that internally with a pretty laborious QA process, where when I say we didn't do our jobs right, if a button's not tracking the way we'd expect it to, then the whole test isn't getting released. And then you'd also see that propagate through data. And when you start looking at the test results, like, oh, why are we seeing no clicks here? Well, then it's probably because we didn't track it right. So it happens for sure. Oh, you got it.
Yeah, so the second question was, how does design maintain the platform and how do we decide what the next test is? So in terms of maintaining the platform, bit cheesy, but design is never really done. So we are always looking for that next chance at modernization, that next chance for improvement, either based off of best practices, something the support team has brought up, or something that the higher up stakeholders have introduced as something we need to move towards. So there's a lot of different avenues that we receive feedback from, and then it's just a team effort to prioritize what happens next. But ideally, we work on modernizing the platform as we introduce other tests, such as like, oh, customers have a complaint about this. We can definitely fix that and test what the best solution is. But while we're at it, why don't we also move towards some best practices that we just as designers know are the best way to follow, introduce different accessibility guidelines. So it's a lot of different pieces coming together. So it's continual maintenance. We're always looking for the next opportunities, combined with input from a lot of different sources that we work together, again, to prioritize.
So
Did that answer your question? I hope I covered everything.
Yeah, I think when what you're saying, there's already something you're looking at, then you can look at other things. But if that doesn't occur, is there like a general once a year, twice a year, a quarterly? I don't know.
Yeah, so when you look at a platform for redesigns, really depends on the company. I found some people do quarterly prioritizations. Recently, we've been doing daily meetings just to figure out like, okay, we did this, what's the next step? So it really depends on who you're working with, what you're working with, and then what sort of time, development, and cost constraints you're working within.
Just to add to that, no matter what type of application or software stack, website, whatever, you will always have a best performing page and a worst performing page. and that should get worked into your, health check, right? In terms of prioritizing what, UX looks at next, yes, you can use best practices to guide that, but you can also use analytics where, that this is the step in your funnel where people drop off the most. So let's go redesign how to do that better. Once you've done that, maybe somewhere else in your website is now the worst performing. And so you can just iteratively move through that journey and figure out where in the funnel you want to attack next. Yeah. Another question.
So, this is kind of a question on just how you would approach something. Instead, if you had a product, a software product that's not compared to something else or upgrading a feature, but literally like a brand new type of product. So it's solving an existing established problem. Those needs to be solved. Here's a product that solves it, but the user base doesn't know how to do anything yet because it's so brand new. How would you approach making that as intuitive as possible? It's a big question, but yeah, I figured.
Yeah, that's where user interviews come in.
Sorry?
That's where user interviews tend to come in. So especially if it's a new product, you don't have it out in the world, you're not collecting any data on it yet. That's when you want to go reach out to either your potential user base or people you know will be specifically interacting with this product. E-commerce is obviously B2C, which gives you a really wide range of people to reach out to. But even in B2B, if you're reaching out to that other business you're interacting with, that's when you can interview them, be like, hey, here's the product we're moving towards. Can you find what you need to look for? Are we providing the right content? So that's where those user interviews and user testing can be a bit more helpful.
Can I ask a little bit more detailed follow-up? So let's say, it already addresses all of it. More about functionality, like how to make it more intuitive. Right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at. More like for my product, we know it addresses it. Like it's used, but it's the intuitiveness is terrible. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, so I would say, user testing and even interviewing your actual users instead of, people that you go and find. But also analytics. Like I keep harping on how important analytics is for what we do. Like I said earlier, you cannot argue with data. So having the infrastructure built to support an analytics process, so understanding literally down to the button clicks and how far people scroll, what they are digesting on the page, tools like Hotjar is that, Google Analytics is that, even some of these other tools like Optimizely has baked in tracking. Integrating those tools into your everyday life and then using that data to drive your next action is huge. If you go into any website that is findable on the first page of Google, chances are they're using analytics. I would place a bet that it's 100%. Unless they're just so lucky dumb, they're using analytics every day to educate, their user behavior. Yeah.
Jonathan, I'll offer you one additional tool. There's a practice called unmoderated user testing that sounds like it might fit really well for you. You can use something like usertesting.com. You can provide access to your software, and you can give people just a set of tasks, essentially. Like, here's the core pathways that we think you need to take through the application. They'll record their actions. They won't have anybody coaching them. So you'll get to see pretty raw, like, where are they getting hung up? What's not working? What is working? And then you can fine tune from there. I've seen that be really powerful. So keep that in mind. With that said, we are pretty much at time here. I think we're right at the top of the hour, so we'll wrap up. I'm sure everybody has other sessions they want to get to. If anybody's sticking around, I think most, if not all of us, will be sticking around, so we'd be happy to talk to you. We'll be around until the keynote here at 4 o'clock, so plenty of time to catch up and trade contact info or swap war stories, whatever you'd like to do. But thanks, everybody. Really appreciate you coming, and yeah, we'll look forward to catching up later. See ya.